topic which we are going to discuss is Route 53 routing policy. So even though Route 53 is an AWS service, anybody can easily understand it, and you can even relate it with other cloud services. Okay. Okay. So now let me start this. Okay. See, before I directly go to Route 53, in simple way, I'll explain what is DNS. So DNS means domain name system. Okay. So it is to resolve name to IP or name to name. Okay. Let's say we're configuring a server, okay, physical or a virtual server, and let's say you have a virtual machine in any cloud with an operating system, and you have configured a web application, web server. And if you need to access it, so normally from your mobile phone, laptop, you type a name, right? When you type a name, what happens in the backend? See, actually, there will be a server called DNS server in internet. There will be a lot of DNS servers in internet, and this DNS servers will have name to IP mapping. See, normally any communication in internet will happen with IP. Okay, for example, if you configure a virtual machine in any cloud which has a web server, the virtual machine will have IP address. For example, 1.1.1.1. Now, from internet, if you are accessing that web server, normally we don't type IP to access it, right? We use names. For example, facebook.com, amazon.com. So how the name is getting resolved? There will be a server called DNS, and in that DNS, there will be something called record. So record is name to IP map. For example, www.example.com. So this name can be mapped to an IP address. So if you have this setup, so people in internet, when they type www.example.com in their browser, so the query goes to DNS asking who has www.example.com. So the DNS server will look into the record and it will understand www.example.com is on so and so IP address. So it will give the IP address as a reply, DNS response. Then the client knows to which IP address it has to forward. So then the client will forward to the server. Okay. So this is how a communication happens. Okay. So there will be a DNS query going to DNS server. For that, the DNS server will send a reply, DNS response. Once after the client knows about the IP address, the client sends, example, a HTTP request to the web server. Right? Have you understood? Now, I'm going to give demo related to this routing. Okay, DNS routing. So how a client is reaching some destination server. Okay, so that's the topic of the day. What is routing? Routing means forwarding the traffic to some destination, right? So today we are going to discuss about that routing policy with help of Route 53. Okay. But see, in a high level, I have explained DNS. See, I can go deep related to DNS for 1 or 2 days, but today's topic's aim is different. So I'm not going to explain in detail more than this about DNS, but we'll talk about other concepts related to routing policy in detail. Okay. Right. Okay. So hope you have understood what is DNS. Okay. So hope you have understood what is DNS. Any questions here? No. Okay. See, I have already configured a server. Okay. In North Virginia region in AWS Cloud. So in North Virginia region, I have a server with the name Linux one. I have configured already a website within, web server within it. Okay, I have already configured it. So let's say this server is in North Virginia, and I have already configured web server. So if you see here, if you select the server, you can see public IP. So we can copy this public IP. If I try accessing it, I'll be able to access the website what I configured. Okay. So you can see. So when I try to access the instance using the public IP address, I'm able to access the website. See, this is the simple web page I configured within this server. Okay. I understood. Within this server, I just configured this simple page. It says this instance is in US East 1A. Right? But we know, see, people in internet, they can't remember the IP. So there should be some name. See, normally in cloud, AWS cloud or in Azure cloud, so when we configure a server with the web application, that provider, Amazon or Microsoft, they themselves will provide you with the name, right? So even in AWS cloud, so you can see here, for the server, there is a name. But even after giving the name is not easy to understand. So if I copy this public DNS name, okay, and if I try accessing, I'll be getting the same. Okay, if I use this name, right, I'm getting the same, right? So we can't remember the IP. That's what we are accessing applications with the help of name. But even after Amazon is giving a name, this name is also not very easy, right? Okay. So what we need to do, see, if we are in a company, if we want to give our own names, our own company names, domain names to the web server, we need to purchase names from some domain registrars. Okay. So who is domain registrar? Domain registrar is companies. They allow you to purchase domain names. Okay. Right. Now, there is a lot of domain registrars around the globe. Okay. So if you own a business, if you have a company, and if you want to give your own name, for example, www. Some other example.com, I'm just saying, if you want to give that name to this server, first you need to purchase the domain name, example.com. Okay. Right. Now there is a lot of domain registrars around the globe. So there is domain registrars like GoDaddy, where you can purchase domains. There is Namecheap, okay, where you can purchase domain. Okay. But for today's session, I'm going to teach you about Route 53. So people who have already, students who have already attended my AWS session, they know what is Route 53. So Route 53 can act as a domain registrar, right? So Route 53 service within AWS cloud can act as a domain registrar, where companies or individuals can go and purchase domains. Okay. And I have already a domain. Okay. I have already purchased a domain in Route 53. See, you can see here, Route 53 is a service within AWS cloud, and I have already purchased a domain. I have registered a domain. And the domain which I registered is with this name, Ekascloud-training.com. So I purchased it by around April 27, 2025, and I purchased it for 1 year. Okay. So I have registered Ekascloud-training.com. So I have purchased this domain. Because I purchased the domain, what Amazon will do is Amazon will create something called a hosted zone. Okay, they will create themselves automatically. I didn't create this. Amazon will create a hosted zone, and via this dashboard, via this hosted zone, what I can do is I can create a record. Okay. What is record? Record is name to IP mapping. So we have a web server created in any cloud, anywhere. Okay. So this server, assume this server is in AWS cloud or in Azure cloud. So for me today, it is in my AWS account, but you can assume like this server is anywhere in the world. Okay. It can be within your office. It can be in AWS cloud. It can be in Azure cloud. Okay. Now in domain registrar in Route 53, I purchased a domain ekascloud-training.com. People in internet, they can't remember the IP address. People in internet, they can't remember the name given by AWS or Microsoft. It's complicated. So to make it simple, what I can do, I have purchased a domain. Now I can create a record. Okay, record is name to IP mapping or name to name mapping. Okay, I've understood. So now I'm going to create a record for this Linux one. So little earlier, I accessed with IP. I was able to access the page. I accessed using the name given by Amazon. I was able to access the page, but I want my own name. Okay. So what I can do, I can go to this Route 53 hosted zone and I can click on create record and I can create a record. Okay. So now I'm going to give a name. See, you can give any name of your choice. Host name can be anything, but this part, this is called domain name. So the domain name is the one you purchased. So I'll go with the name symbol.ekascloud-training.com. What I can do is, if I select the record type as A, it means it will route to IPv4 address. So I can go to the Linux server. I can copy the public IP address and I can paste it here. Okay. So which means I'm creating a name with symbol.ekascloud-training.com and I'm pointing to the public address of the Linux instance. Okay. Yeah. And I can click on create record. See, while creating this record, there is something called TTL. I'll explain today. And there is something called routing policies. This is the topic of the day. We'll talk about this. But as of now, I am not explaining about TTL and routing policy. I'm just creating a record. Okay, I can create a record like this. Okay, this is one way. A name to IP address. Right? So once after I create this, now anybody in the world at this moment, what they can do, so they can type symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Okay, if they type this name, so this name will be resolving the IP address of the server which I created in North Virginia. It actually cannot be, it need not be in only AWS cloud. It can be, the server can be anywhere. But I just created a record and pointed the public IP address. Have you understood? This routing is actually called a symbol routing. Okay, so which means people in internet using their mobile phone or laptop, so they send a request typing symbol.ekascloud-training.com. The request goes to the DNS server in internet, where I have a record. The record what I created is symbol.ekascloud-training.com and I pointed to the public address of this instance. So the public address of this instance is 18.234 180 200. Okay, so I created like this 18.234 180 200. Okay, so it means people in internet sending a request to DNS server. DNS server has a record symbol.ekascloud-training.com pointed to this public address. There will be a DNS response coming here and they will be forwarded to the server. Okay, this routing is actually called symbol routing. That's what I gave a name symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Okay, have you understood? Any questions? If you have questions, you can ask. Okay, so hope you have understood about symbol routing. What is symbol routing? So people in internet sending request to a name, for example, symbol.ekascloud-training.com. So that will be mapped to a public IP address. That public address is already given to some EC2 instance in AWS Cloud, or it can be a server in corporate data center, or it can be a server in Azure Cloud, anywhere. It can be anywhere. Okay. So the query goes to DNS server in internet. It gives the IP, and people in internet forwarded to that particular public address. This is called symbol routing. Okay. Right. And maybe you can now try accessing it. In this session, as of now, there is around 31 students. You can, if you try this symbol.ekascloud-training.com, this will be available to anyone in the world. Okay. Can you try? Can you say whether you are able to access it? Unable to access. Sarmo.
Yes, sir.
Right. Able to access, right? So what you type? Symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Okay. Okay. Ekascloud-training.com. So if you type this name, you will get this website. Okay. Now, see, normally in a production environment, so let's say this is your company. If your company have configured a server in your corporate data center or in cloud, and if they have done this type of setup, this is not considered as a highly available setup, right? So if the application fails, people in internet will send request to Route53. Route53 will give the IP. Then all the way the traffic goes to the destination server, and then because the application is not available, okay, the page is not accessible. Have you understood? This happens. I can do it today. I can go to the Linux system. I can stop the service. What happens? In the backend, the query goes to DNS. DNS will say that the application is in this IP. People will be forwarded all over internet from Australia to North Virginia, like I'm saying just for example, and they will not get anything, right? It happens, okay? So in symbol routing, if sometimes the application fails, or the OS fails, or the machine fails, or the data center fails, or the availability zone fails, whatever fails, okay, it's not available. So we know in order to have high availability, instead of configuring one server, normally we need to configure multiple server, right? So I have already done, okay, see, today I don't want to waste time in setting up the servers. That's what I created everything yesterday. Okay. So what I have done is, I have already multiple server. Okay. I have Linux 2. I made that server as also as a web server. Okay. So Linux 1 is acting as web server. Linux 2 is also acting as web server. I'll show you. Okay, so this is Linux 2. I already configured this as well as a web server, and it has a public IP, which is certified.175.11873. 11873. Okay, it has this public IP. And how I configured purposefully this instance in one availability zone in US, and I configured this instance in another availability zone. Okay, so which is in 1B. Now I see, if it is a real production grade application, whatever the data you have here, the same data will also be here. Okay, but because I am teaching, I didn't do like that. I made a small change. Here I placed a page like this. Okay, this instance is in US East 1A. So when you try accessing that server's public IP, you get that. When you access the name given by AWS, you get that. And after changing the name as well, you get that, right? This is what you got, right? Okay, but for the second server, if I go to the second server and if I copy the public IP or the public DNS name given by Amazon, I made a small change. I didn't do the same data. Okay, so here it will print this instance is in US East 1A. That's how I configured. But if you try accessing the second Linux server's public endpoint, you are getting this instance is in US East 1B. Right? It's a small change. So here I purposefully configured this instance is in 1A. Here I configured this instance is in 1B. That's a small change. Maybe if you are in a company, if your enterprise is configuring an application which needs high availability, how it will be? The web application data between the first server and the second server will be synchronized. So both server will have same data. People in internet, whether they send request to this server or they send request to the other server, they should get the same page. If this availability zone fails, people may be forwarded to the other availability zone, but they should get the same data, right? If they are accessing ICICI Bank's website, so whether it goes here or it goes here, they should get the ICICI Bank's website, right? So that's how it will be in the production environment. So the data will be synchronized between multiple servers. Okay, but purposefully, I didn't do that. What I did on the Linux first server, I made a text saying this instance is in US East 1A. On the Linux 2 server, I made a small text change saying this instance is in US East 1B. Okay. Now, how it will be in a production environment if you have two servers? Now, from the end user point of view, it is a single application, right? So they can't type two names, right? Facebook.com is always a single name, right? Very similarly, people in internet has to type a single name. But now you have two IP addresses. Is it possible to configure like this symbol.ekascloud-training.com pointing to 18.234, 180 and 213, as well as is it possible to again make 35, 175, 118, 73? If you ask, yes, it is possible. Okay. Have you understood what I'm saying? It is possible that you can create a record in Route 53, symbol.ekascloud-training.com, pointing to two IP addresses. One server is in one availability zone, other server is in other availability zone. Have you understood? It will work perfectly. You don't need load balancer. So, but how it works? It will not work in a proper way. So, let's say 100 people are accessing the website. For few people, Route 53 may serve this IP address. For few people, Route 53 may serve the other IP address. It's not a guarantee. It's not 50-50. Okay. Some people will be forwarded here. Some people will be forwarded here. Have you understood? Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Right. Yes. So, but to do proper load balancing, so normally what we have done, so if you have multiple server spread across multiple availability zone, we need to also have something called the load balance, right?
Yes.
Right. So, which means if you have one instance in one availability zone and another instance in another availability zone, instead of mapping a single name to multiple IP, right? What has to be done is you need to have a load balancer. Once you create load balancer will have a single name. See, I have already done all this, okay? I have already two servers and these two servers are already grouped and it is behind the load balance. So I have done the setup already. So I have grouped these two servers. You can see here, Linux 1 and Linux 2 is already grouped and it is behind this load balancer in AWS Cloud. Okay, which means if you see, once you normally configure a load balancer in AWS Cloud, Amazon will give a DNS name for that. Okay, they will give a name. Now, if I copy this name and if I try accessing it, so this is a name given by Amazon. It's not an easy name. But if I try accessing it, you can see the request is going to 1B availability zone, which means I'm sending request to load balancer. Load balancer is forwarding to the second data center, right? So it's like this. So I'm sending request to load balancer. Load balancer is sending here. Maybe if I do a refresh, you can see the request is going to 1A. See, I want to show that the data is switching between different data centers. That's the reason I purposefully configured a text-based page. Okay. So now you can see if you do a refresh. So first request goes to second data center server. If you do a refresh, the second request goes here. So this is actually considered as a highly available design, right? So you need to have two servers spread across two availability zone, and you need to have a load balancer. Load balancer have an endpoint. Now people sending requests to load balancer's endpoint, the load balancer will do the load balancing, which means 100 people sending request to load balancer, 50 traffic will go here and 50 traffic will go here, right? And if sometimes if the server fails, we know that the traffic will go here to the other availability zone, right? Have you understood? Now, in AWS Cloud, when you configure a load balancer, the load balancer will not have IP. See, this instance had IP, this instance had IP, but this load balancer will not have IP in AWS Cloud. This load balancer will have a DNS name. But again, this name is not easy. So this name is not easy. So to make it simple again, what I can do is I can go to Route53, right? I can create a record. Okay, maybe I'll delete this record. I can create a record. Okay, I'll again give the name symbol.ekascloud-training.com, but I don't have an IP to point, because I told you when you create a load balancer in AWS Cloud, Amazon will not give you a IP address. So now in Route53, what can be done is a name can be mapped to another name. So already the load balancer in AWS Cloud has a DNS name. Now I want a symbol name mapped to the name given by Amazon. Okay. This is also a symbol record, but the record type is called CNAME, canonical name. Okay. So I'm creating a CNAME record. Here, I'll go to Route53. I'm giving a name symbol.ekascloud-training.com, and I'm using CNAME type. What is CNAME record type? Routes traffic to another domain name. And now I'll point I can't point to IP address if it is CNAME. I need to point to a DNS name. And already Amazon have given a DNS name. I'll copy this DNS name and I'll map it here. Okay. So now if I do this, this is also a symbol routing. So for people in internet, they are sending requests to a DNS server in internet, asking symbol.ekascloud-training.com. But this symbol.ekascloud-training.com is pointed to a load balancer's DNS name. Okay. Load balancer's DNS name. Okay. So which means people in internet will be forwarded to load balancer. Now the load balancer decides whether to forward here or here. Like maybe 100 people are accessing it. Load balancer will forward 50 requests here, 50 here. Okay. This is again a highly available design. Have you understood? But still it is symbol routing. Have you understood? Any questions here? So let me do it. I'll click on create. Okay. See what I did. I created a name symbol.ekascloud-training.com, pointed to another DNS name, and that DNS name is the DNS name of the load balancer in AWS Cloud. So like I told you, people in internet, you are the people in internet as of now, right? So you are sending requests to internet DNS server, which is Route53. Route53 will give the name of the load balancer, and you are forwarded to the load balancer. Load balancer now decides whether to forward here or here. Okay, now let's try. So little earlier, I was using the name symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Okay, at that time, we were pointed to one server, right? But now we are pointed to a load balancer. How we know? If you do a refresh, you will know. If you do a refresh, you can see it is switching between symbol.ekascloud-training.com is switching between 1A, 1B, 1A and 1B server. Have you understood? So I understood.
Yes, sir.
Clear.
Okay. So
Clear.
yeah, so I have already two instances, one in 1A availability zone, another in 1B availability zone, created yesterday night. I have a load balancer as well, created today morning. And normally in AWS Cloud, when you create a load balancer, Amazon will give a name. Okay, but I don't want that name given by Amazon because it's not our company's name. So I have a domain purchased in Route53, Ekascloud-training.com. So I need to map easy name to the name given by Amazon. So name to name mapping can be done with a record type called CNAME. Okay, so I created a CNAME record in Route53. So you can see I've gone to Route53. I created a record symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Record type is CNAME, and I pointed to the load balancers DNS name. And now when you send request using this name, okay, you can see the request is going to instance in US East 1B availability zone. If you do a refresh, it is going to 1A availability zone. Okay. Hope this is clear. This is also a symbol routing. So first I was creating a record type of A pointing to a single instance. Now I created a record type of CNAME pointing to a load balancers instance, but still the routing type is symbol. Okay. This is a symbol routing. Have you understood? In DNS, it is a symbol routing. Okay. Now, if this instance fails, the load balancer will forward here, right? But what happens if the entire region fails? So let's say US East region had some natural disaster, or maybe something gone wrong, some network connectivity issues or something. Okay. What happens? Even though you have high availability setup within the region, people in internet, they can't get the page, right? So people in internet, they will send request symbol.ekascloud-training.com. Route53 or DNS in internet will resolve the load balancers endpoint. Then the traffic goes to load balancer, and then because there is a disaster, it cannot reach the server, even though you have multiple servers configured in North Virginia region. Have you understood? So now you need more disaster recovery like setup, right? I have already created servers yesterday night. I'll show you. So now I'll show you how it is. We are moving to a different routing today. Right. See, all this, whatever I have shown you till now, is in US region. Okay. So this is all in my US region, US East 1A. There is no disasters. It is perfectly working, and we saw that. Okay, but what I have done is I have already created servers in Singapore as well. Okay, I have EC2 instance in Singapore in first availability zone as well as in second availability. So this is Linux 3 and this is Linux 4. Okay, and I have a load balancer as well in Singapore. Okay, I have done all this yesterday. I don't want to waste time, but my main aim is to teach you mainly about policies, routing policies. Okay, that's what I have created all this yesterday. So this is in Singapore's first availability zone, Linux 3, and this is in Singapore's second availability zone. And I have created a load balancer as well in Singapore. Yeah, this is Singapore region. Okay, so just AP Southeast 1. This is AP Southeast 1A and this is AP Southeast 1B. Okay. Now, see why we want these types of setup. So if it is a global application, if it is an application accessed by people all over the world, even if there is a disaster in one region, people should get the page. Okay. So if in that case, we can have similar setup, whatever we had in US region, configured in a different region. See, it need not be only in Singapore. It can be configured in London. It can be configured in Sydney. It can do the same configuration multiple times across multiple Amazon's region. Have you understood? Or across multiple other cloud. Okay. What? Right. Now I have this setup. So I'll show you. See, these two, Linux 1 and Linux 2 servers are running in North Virginia. And they are grouped, and a load balancer is in front of that server. Okay. There is a load balancer in North Virginia. Very similarly, I have Linux 3 and Linux 4 configured in Singapore. Okay. So Linux 3 and Linux 4 in Singapore. And I have already grouped those servers. Okay, you can see there is a target group in Singapore. And I have a load balancer as well in Singapore. Okay. But now, it cannot be a simple routing. Okay. Now, this load balancer in Singapore will also have a DNS name. Right? Now, I can't do a symbol routing. The reason is, if I create a name, symbol.ekascloud-training.com, I can't point to two IP addresses or two DNS names. I'll show you that, okay? See, now I have one load balancer in North Virginia. I have another load balancer in Singapore. Okay. Now in Route 53, I want to create an easy name, right? Maybe symbol.ekascloud-training.com. But what I can't do, I have already pointed this to load balancer in North Virginia and it is perfectly working. We saw that. But what I'm saying, I can't point to another DNS name or another IP address. Okay. Symbol routing will allow you to map one name to one IP or one name to one name. Have you understood? Okay. So I'll show you. I'll go to Route 53. I have already a name symbol.ekascloud-training.com pointed to the load balancer in US region. Because of that, symbol.ekascloud-training.com. If you type this name, you are forwarded to the load balancer in US and it is switching between the instances in US. Okay. But if I go to Route 53 and if I try to create another record, because I have a disaster recovery setup, because I have a global application, but if I go to Route 53 and if I try to create again the same name, because that's how we are accessing facebook.com, right? The same name. But if you try to create symbol.ekascloud-training.com pointing to the load balancer of Singapore, okay? So this is the load balancer in Singapore. If I copy this and if I paste it, and if you click on create, it will not work. Okay. Right? What it says, a record with specified name already exists. You can't map a name, single name to multiple IP or single name to multiple name. Have you understood? Okay, now for that only in Route 53, there are different routing policies. I don't think I can cover everything. Maybe I need to give one part 2 session for this. Okay, but today I'll teach you few. Okay, right. Now I'm moving towards the second routing policy. The second routing policy which I'm going to teach you is there is a lot, but let's stop weighted routing. Okay. Weighted routing. Okay. So I told you, you can't map a single name to multiple DNS names of multiple load balancers using symbol routing. That's what we are moving towards other routing policy. And I am explaining about a routing policy called weighted routing now. Okay. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a record in Route 53, which is the DNS in internet. I'll give a new name. I'll say weighted.ekascloud-training.com. So I'm pointing to the load balancer in North Virginia, not fully typing. So assume this is load balancer in North Virginia. Okay. So this name, I'm pointing to the load balancer in North Virginia, and I'll give a weight of 50. The weight of 50 means 50% traffic should go to North Virginia. And I can again give the same name. I told you in symbol routing it's not possible, but in weighted routing it's possible. So in Route 53, there is a routing policy called weighted routing. So if you go with weighted.ekascloud-training.com, and this time, if you are pointing to the load balancer in Singapore, you can give again a weight. See, it need not be 50-50. You can even give 80-20. Right? Which means if you give 80-20, 80% people in Indirect will be forwarded to one region, 20% people in Indirect will be forwarded to another region. Okay? Right. So now let me do this. Okay, see here. I'm in Route 53 and I'll click on create record. This time I'm giving a different name. Weighted.ekascloud-training.com. Record type is CNAME because I'm pointing to the endpoint. Name pointing to another name is CNAME. So I go to the load balancer of North Virginia. I copy the DNS name and I'll paste it here. And I told you I can't create same name if it is symbol routing, but it is possible with other routing policies. There is a lot of routing policies. I think I can't cover everything today, but I'll go with few today. So I'll go with weighted. Now, if you choose weighted, okay, you can give a weight. So the weight range is between 0 to 250 weight, but still it will act as a percentage. Okay, so I'll go with 50. Okay, I will talk about what is this health check little later. I'll go with record ID of R1. You can give any name for the record ID. Okay, and now I'll click on create record. Okay, so what I did, I gone to Route 53. I created weighted.ekascloud-training.com and I gave a weight of 50 and I pointed to the load balancer in North Virginia. Okay. Now I'll create one more record. I'll click on create record. I'll give the same name. So weighted.ekascloud-training.com, CNAME, but this time I'm using the load balancer in North Singapore. Okay, so I'm going to Singapore region. I'll copy the DNS name and I'll paste it here. And I'll go with weighted, and this time I'll say 50. And record ID, I'll go with some random name. You can go with R2 and you can click on create. Little earlier, we were not able to create same name if it is symbol routing. But now with weighted routing, it is possible. Have you understood? So which means now people in Internet, okay, so you're all in Internet, 34 of you are in Internet already. You can now try. Okay, I can't guarantee. Okay, you will get response from Singapore, or I can't guarantee that you will get response from Mumbai. Maybe you need to say, right? You can put it in the chat. So I hope there are few. Imran is from a different country, right? So you can try. Maybe you may be directed to North Virginia. Is there anyone from other countries? Rather be clubby. No, right? Okay, so no worries. Okay, you try. Okay, so I want you to try typing this name, weighted.ekascloud-training.com. So what I'm saying, 50% people, 50% of you will get the response from the load balancer in North Virginia. 50% of the people will get response from the load balancer in Singapore. Okay, can you try? Let me try. Okay, I don't know from where I'm going to get response. I may be getting the response from North Virginia, or I may be getting the response from Singapore. Okay, let me try. So I'll use weighted.ekascloud-training.com. Okay. Okay. Right. So I'm getting the response from Singapore. So anyone else got response from North Virginia?
I got response from North Virginia.
Okay.
I have a doubt here, sir. So once we get response from North Virginia, can we not go to Singapore? I tried to refresh it multiple times.
No, it will not switch. It is not a load balancer. So it will, for that only there is something called TTL. Okay, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. So a lot of students have tried. So some of you got response from North Virginia. So Savita, Nagaraj.
Me, US East 1B.
Yeah, lot of people. And maybe, Mani got response from Southeast. Okay, no problem, right? So I told you, right? Weighted routing, right? You can give some weight, and I told you weight will act like a percentage. So 50% traffic can be directed to one region, and 50% traffic will be directed to another region. But like Anirudh asked, if you do a refresh, it is not going to sometimes switch to a US region. Okay, see, if you do a refresh, it is just, say I'm doing refresh here. It is switching between only instance in US, right? It is not going to Singapore, right? The reason is, I'll tell you. See, in DNS, there is something called TTL, time to live. So let's say this is Anirudh. So Anirudh is sending a request to DNS asking weighted.ekascloud-training.com. So there is two records in DNS. One record is pointing to North Virginia and one record is pointing to Singapore. I told you, you may get any one, right? So 50 people will get from load balancer endpoint of North Virginia, and 50 people will get the load balancer endpoint of Singapore. That's what I said, right? So Anirudh got, let's say, the North Virginia. So he is pointed to this load balancer. So when he is doing the refresh, he will be always switching between the instance in North Virginia. He may be not directed to Singapore. The reason is, while Route 53 is serving the record, it will say that the record can be cached in his own mobile phone or laptop for how many seconds? I didn't do any changes while setting up.
300.
I set for 300 seconds by default. Okay, so that's called TTL. Now, after 300 seconds, after 5 minutes, maybe if you try again after 5 minutes, if you should not access within 5 minutes. You should just be idle for 5 minutes. Don't do any activity. After 5 minutes, when you access, there may be a chance. I can't guarantee again. So there may be a chance that this time you may belong to the other 50%. So you'll get the response of Singapore and you'll be forwarded to Singapore. Have you understood? Have you understood?
Yes,
That is
sir.
actually called TTL, time to live. See,
That's clear.
when you send request to DNS, DNS will give you the response and that will be cached in your mobile phone. Okay. Even when you within the 5 minutes, if you try again to access, your query will not go to Route 53. Why we have TTL? TTL is actually to reduce the traffic going to Route 53. It's because you send request once, because there is TTL of 5 minutes. Within 5 minutes, if you are accessing again weighted.ekascloud-training.com, you are not going to access DNS. You are just directly forwarded to the endpoints. That's the reason when you do a refresh, it is not going to sync. Have you understood? So, any questions?
Sir, one doubt, sir. How will path-based routing work with this? So let's say we are going to use path-based routing.
So path, we are just adding to the endpoint, right? So we are just adding that path here.
Yes.
It is based on the configuration what we do within the OS, or the people who develop the website. They need to decide. That has to be in the load balancer set. That is nothing. That's not going to affect anything in the route vertical. Okay.
Okay, so the same TTL applies. So if we give a path here, it is not considered like a refresh. So it won't go to the other thing. It will just be the same load balancer.
Yes.
Okay.
So now, hope you have understood two types of routing. The first routing which I explained is symbol routing. Second routing type which I explained is weighted routing. So I told you in symbol routing, you can point one name to IP or one name to another name, right? But in weighted routing, you can point name to multiple IP, giving weights. I didn't do it. I gone with name to multiple name. This is what I did, right? Because I had load balancer in North Virginia and load balancer in Singapore. Okay. Now see, weighted routing is used for various use cases. See, I gave an example saying 50 goes here and 50 goes here, right? This can be like a global application, right? So which means if 100 people are accessing 50% traffic goes here and 50 goes there. That is one. But it is not, weighted routing is not used only for this. Sometimes gradually changing the version of application from one version to another version. So people will use this weighted routing. Okay. So if you go to internet, search for weighted routing policy, you may get a lot of architectural drawings. So they will be explaining about this. Okay. So you can see here. So Route 53 is serving 90% of the traffic to this production environment. So this production environment, it may be multiple servers, load balancers. Okay. And let's say this is a version. This is a blue setup. Okay. Now let's say the developers have created new version of application and they have done that in the same region or maybe in a different region. Okay. Let's say this is done in the same region or the nearest region. Now your enterprise want all the customers in internet to gradually shift the traffic from the old version of application to the new version of application. We call this as blue-green setup, okay, or canary deployment. Okay, so from old version, if you want to gradually shift all your traffic to the new version, so what people will do is in Route 53 they will give 10% traffic, which means people across the globe, 10% of the people will be forwarded to one environment. And if it is working fine, gradually they will shift all the traffic to the new production environment. Have you understood? For these types of situations, weighted routings are used. Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, see, I'll tell you one more or maybe two more routing policy. We'll make it a part 2 of routing policy in another session. Yeah. Now, listen. I explained single routing, I explained weighted routing, but weighted routing also may have some drawbacks. I'll tell you. I told you if it is nearest region, it is okay. Let's say it is US East 1 and US East 2. I'm saying it is okay. But it is not okay to do a weighted routing between US East and Singapore. I'll tell you the reason. See, I told you little earlier, in US East 1, you have old production environment. And in US East 2, which is near where you are setting up the new production environment, if you are gradually shifting the traffic from one environment to another environment, this routing helps. But if for a global application, if you set weighted routing, there is some drawbacks. I'll tell you. See, let's say we have all this set up. Let's say Anirudh is in US and I am in India. Okay. For me, Singapore is near. Okay. For Anirudh, because he is in US is near. But I told you it's not a guarantee, right? So which means, let's say people in India, when they send request to DNS will randomly give one record back. So Anirudh is in US, he may be forwarded to Singapore. Let's say I am in Singapore, I am sending request to DNS. DNS will give a response to me. I may be forwarded to US. This is not good routing, right? Have you understood? I told you weighted routing can be done between regions which are near. If you are shifting traffic from one environment to another environment, it is okay, good. But it is not good if it is for global application, because weighted routing, I told you 50%, but I didn't say which client will get that. So there may be a chance that people in US may be directed to Singapore and people in Singapore may be directed to US. What happens by doing this then? There will be latency issues, right? So people in Singapore, if they are forwarded to North Virginia, there will be latency issue. And people in US, if they are forwarded to Singapore, there will be latency issues, right? That can be fixed with other mechanisms like accelerators, CloudFront, but still, if you don't have all those set up, right, there is issues, right? Now for that only, again, we are moving towards other routing. There is other routing policies in Route 53. Okay. There is a lot of routing policy. I'll teach you one or two more. Okay. Right. Okay. So I'll teach you about geolocation now. So the name says geolocation. So location based routing. Right. Imran is here. Maybe I can test it with Imran. Is there anyone from a different country? Then I can test it with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Who is that?
Imran. Here.
You are in US. Dubai,
I'm
right?
in Qatar.
Qatar.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I can create a policy saying people from Qatar should be directed to US, and people in India should be directed to Singapore. Okay, like that I can create a policy in Route 53. So that is geolocation routing. Okay. So you know what is my setup. So I have a high availability setup in US East and I have high availability setup in Singapore. Now I'm going to create a different record type, which is geolocation based routing. Because symbol routing will forward to one endpoint. Weighted routing is okay when you do blue-green setup, shifting traffic from one application version to another application in nearest region. Not suitable for global application. Okay. Now we have geolocation based routing. Okay. Now let me create it. Okay. Maybe I can delete all this or I can keep all this and then along with that I can create record. Okay. I'll create new record. Okay. I'll say geolocation.ekascloud-training.com. I'll use CNAME and I'll use the load balancer endpoint in North Virginia. I'll add it here. I can reduce the TTL if I want. I explain what is TTL. So if Imran is accessing for Imran's mobile phone, this will be cached for 60 seconds. Okay. And I'll go with geolocation. And here it is asking for the location. So I don't know whether Qatar is directly, yeah, it's there. Okay. So I can add the location. Okay. And because I said location is Qatar, for sure, for him, he will be directed to North Virginia. Okay. Have you understood? Maybe not only for Imran, maybe all the people in Qatar will be forwarded to North Virginia. Have you understood? That is geolocation based routing. Now I'll give some record ID. You can give any random record ID and you can click on create record. Okay. I'll click on create record. Maybe now Imran can access. Okay. So if Imran is trying to access with the name geolocation.ekascloud-training.com, he will get the page. But we may not get the page. Let's try. Geolocation.ekascloud-training.com. Right? So it's not working for me. Can you try, Imran?
Yes, sir.
You'll get a response from North Virginia. Are you getting it?
Geolocation.ekascloud-training.com.
Yeah, where is it? Yeah, here it is. Okay, geolocation.ekascloud-training.com. Sometimes it may reflect little late. Yeah, but try it will work.
Let me check.
I can give the name in the chat.
Yeah, can you share in the chat?
Are you getting it?
1 second.
Actually, this is not a HTTPS setup. Maybe sometimes if you are using Google Chrome browser, it may try to connect in HTTPS. You need to try with HTTP, okay?
Okay.
So Mani have shared the URL, right? Maybe you need to click on that link that will direct you to this name.
Not secure, it's showing some issue.
Yeah, it is not secure, but you can continue to access it.
The
you don't have any
option
sensitive
is
data,
not coming. It's saying reload option. I'm trying again in HTTP. Which maybe some Catch issue something.
It has to work. Okay, anyway, so you can try little later. Let me
Okay.
continue creating the other record. Okay, so I'll click on create record and I'll say geolocation.ekascloud-training.com pointing to CNAME. This time I'll use the Singapore's load balancers endpoint and I'll use geolocation. I'll use India. Okay, and I'll use R2 and I'll click on create record. So which means people in India now can send requests to Singapore. Okay, so people in India, when they try accessing, they will be forwarded to Singapore's load balancer. Okay, for sure you will get Singapore. Okay, you will not get North Virginia. Can you try? So let me try.
Getting.
So geolocation.ekascloud-training.com. Okay. Right, so going in HTTPS. Geolocation, what I missed. Yeah, sometimes see, maybe use a different browser. Okay, let me try with some other browser because your data may be in cache, right? Some caching issues may be there. Okay, let me use a different browser. Let me try. So, who are all getting it?
I'm able to get it, sir.
Yes, sir, I'm getting.
Anirudh here.
Okay, okay. Yes.
I'm getting.
Then it's good. Okay, right. I have done it correctly. So maybe because I am giving a lot of demo, there may be cache issues. It says DNS probe, right? Something issues. Okay, so now let me use a different browser and try. geolocation.ekascloud-training.com. Okay.
Sir, quick question.
Yes.
So if we change the browser, the cache value will change, or how it works
No,
in terms of caching?
Changing the browser will not change the cache actually. It is machine cache. It will be in the local computer, but I was just trying. Sometimes browser also will have cache. Okay. But cache is stored in the machine level. Okay. DNS cache. So changing the browser will not actually fix the issue sometimes. Sometimes it may fix because browser cache also will be there. That's the reason I tried with a different browser. Okay. Yeah, let me wait for a few minutes. Maybe after, because previous TTL is around 300 seconds. Maybe if I try accessing after 300 seconds, it will work. But maybe if it is accessible for others, it is okay. Right. And Imran, again, I want you to try. Okay. So which means people in certain country, they will be forwarded to, which means people in Qatar, they will be forwarded to North Virginia region. Right. It will switch between the instances in North Virginia. If the server fails there, the people will get the response. People in India will be always forwarded to Singapore. Okay, this is geolocation. By doing geolocation, what is happening? So you are improving the latency, right? I understood. So, Imran, is it working
Yes,
now?
sir.
Working?
No, I'm not working, sir. But actually, the browser same DNS issue is coming.
You were trying the previous names earlier?
Geolocation, yeah.
No. Before geolocation, did you try accessing
Yeah.
people?
That I tried.
Maybe
That was
that
working.
may be the reason. Because in my case, because I'm using the same servers multiple times to give demo, it may be a problem. So maybe you need to wait 5 minutes. Wait for 5 minutes. Don't do anything.
Okay.
Then after that, try accessing it. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So people in India are forwarded to Singapore, right? Have you understood? Now, what happens if someone is from Malaysia accessing it? So Malaysia, there was a student, right? Is she here? No. So, right, if someone is in Malaysia and if they are trying to access, they will not get the page because I created only 2 entries. People in India forwarding to Singapore, and people in Qatar forwarded to North Virginia. That's what I did. So which means people from other countries, they don't get the page. Okay, but we can create a record in geolocation saying a default record. Okay, default location, which means default record will point to the location whatever we select. See, if I want, I can point to North Virginia, which means all the I don't then really need specifically Qatar location. If I say default, other than India, all the people will be forwarded to North Virginia. Have you understood? If I delete the record which I created little earlier for Qatar, and if I create a location as default, so people in India sending requests will always forward to Singapore. All the other countries will be forwarded to North Virginia. Have you understood? Like this, like that as well, we can create record in Route53, right? Not doing it, but that's called default. Okay, like it says here. Now, finally, I'll teach you. Yes.
Can we use VPN clients to bypass this?
Yeah. So it is possible. See, let's say Anirudh is in India. Okay. So if he's sending requests to DNS, DNS will give the response of Singapore. That's what I configured. So he will get now Singapore's endpoint. Now, let's say Anirudh is trying to connect to Imran's home via VPN. Or maybe let's say he's connecting somehow to Imran's home. And from Imran's home, if he's trying accessing, then right, it's like you are connected to Qatar, right? Even though you are physically in India, but you are connecting to Qatar and from there you are accessing it. So you will get the response from North Virginia.
Okay.
Right. So maybe if you try using a VPN to Qatar and then from Qatar, if you try accessing the name geolocation.ekascloud-training.com, you will be forwarded to this North Virginia region. Okay. Right.
Okay.
I tried that, sir. I tried the VPN from Germany. I am not able to access the
Germany, I didn't configure, right? You need to try Qatar VPN.
because it is not mapped out. That's what yes, sir. That's what I was trying. I was checking whether I will be able to access it from Germany, but I was not able to access this.
See,
Because you are restricted only in India. Na?
Mhm.
So I tried to access from Germany, but it was not able to access.
Okay. Maybe you can try. I don't know whether VPN to Qatar is available. Maybe if you have a VPN application, you can try connecting to Qatar, and from there, if you try accessing it, it will work. Or let me change it to some other. If you want Germany, let me make an entry in entry as Germany. Okay, I'll remove Qatar and I'll make it to Germany. Then, if you establish VPN to Germany and try accessing it, you will be able to access the page. Okay. So let me create another record. I'll say geolocation.ekascloud-training.com pointing to CNAME. Sorry, record type is CNAME, and I'll point to load balancer in North Virginia. I'll create geolocation. I'll search for Germany, and I'll give R3 as record ID, and I'll click on create. Okay, now establishing a VPN to Germany, and from Germany, if you try accessing, you will get response from North Virginia. Okay.
So instead of cities, can we put the geolocation as regions? Like Germany போடாம யூரோப் மாதிரி போடலாங்களா? யூரோப், அமெரிக்கா அந்த மாதிரி போடலாங்களா?
Yes. Actually, you can use country names, you can use continent name. Okay. But let me edit it. If you want, instead of Germany, so I'll change the location to Europe. Okay. Right. Now, if you create VPN to any Europe region, and from there, if you try accessing, you will get response from North Virginia. Okay. Have you understood?
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Clear.
are you sharing your screen, sir?
No. Yeah, I was sharing. Maybe one second.
We can see that the
web page we are able
geolocation,
yeah.
that web page.
I think someone else is sharing, right? So because he shared, my screen stopped. Okay. Yeah, now can you see? I changed actually. Okay, I added
This
another record, geolocation.ekascloud-training.com, pointed to Europe, not specific country. Okay. How to do that? So while creating, there is an option. Instead of selecting countries, you can select continents. Okay. Right. And are you able to access Dhananjay now?
Yes, sir. I'm accessing it.
Okay. So you are getting response
Let
from
me put the.
you, right?
I will share the screen.
Yeah, if you want, you can share
Yes,
yourself.
I will put the screenshot.
Share the screenshot. Okay. No, you are getting error, right? You're not able to access. Okay, no problem. So you are getting the page, it is okay.
Sir, is there any way like can we detect if someone is using VPN and accessing this?
No, we can't detect from the Route 53 point of view, right? Can't detect, right?
But Jirish, is there any way that we can find out that who is using based on the IP?
Yeah, that is possible. So the logs will be there. So within
Yeah,
the
so
load
logs will
balancer, we
be,
can
it will be logged, right?
log. Yes.
Okay.
Anirudh is, let's say, using a VPN to let's say Qatar, and from Qatar, if he is accessing, and Anirudh's IP address may not be there in the log, but the IP address of the Qatar will be there in the log. Okay. Right. Let's say Anirudh is accessing Imran's home, and from Imran's home, he's sending a request to load balancer, right? So which means this IP address of Imran's home will be there in the log of the load balancer, or maybe in the server level, right? Okay. Now finally, okay, see, I'll teach you one more routing and finish. Okay, there is a lot of routing, but I don't have a lot of time, so I'll teach you one more routing. So I taught you about symbol routing, I taught you about weighted routing, I taught you about geolocation. Now I'll directly go to failover. Latency will be very similar, but I'm not teaching now. Maybe we'll have a separate session for latency, multi-value, IP-based geo proximity. Geo proximity is also very good.
Now I can
but
access. Sorry to interrupt.
okay. So if you are able to access it, is good, right? So which means now Imran is able to access North Virginia server, right? You are not getting response from Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now, okay, I'll teach you one more and then I'll finish. Okay. So the final routing which I'm going to teach you is failover. See, let's say you have an application configured in North Virginia. That's your primary region. Okay, this is your primary region. So in the event of disaster, the secondary region, the traffic should flow to secondary region. Until that time, no traffic should flow to secondary region. Okay, so which means you have a similar setup, whatever you had in North Virginia should be configured in Singapore. You should have all the setup in Singapore. It will be simply running. It will be costing you as well, but for some enterprises, they will do that. Okay? So they may expect a disaster. If there is a disaster, so they want the traffic to be shifted to a different region. Okay, right. So it means people in internet, when they send requests to Route 53, always they will be forwarded to one region, whether they are in India or Singapore or wherever they are. Okay, maybe we can have other mechanisms like CloudFront, global accelerator to do the speed up. Okay, even though they are in Australia, if they are accessing North Virginia, to have low latency access, we can have other mechanisms like CloudFront or global accelerator. Okay, now all people across the globe, okay, let's say people across the globe, they are always forwarded here. Okay, this is primary record in failover. Okay, so the name of the routing policy is failover. I'm going to create failover routing. When I create failover routing, it will ask which is the primary region. I'll point the primary region for the load balancer in North Virginia, which means all the people in the world always forwarded to the North Virginia region. And I'll also create a secondary record for failover, and I'll say the load balancer in Singapore. No traffic will flow to Singapore by default, but if there is a disaster, then automatically Route 53 will route all the people in the world to access the data from website from Singapore. Have you understood? That is secondary. Okay, now let me do this. Because I have already 2 regions set up, now I can easily create a record in Route 53. Okay, so I can go to Route 53, click on create record. But see, before I do this, I forget, there is one very important thing we need to set up, which is called health check. How Route 53 knows? See, let's say this is a DNS server. So Anirudh is sending request. Anirudh is getting response from North Virginia, response of the load balancer in North Virginia, and Anirudh is forwarded to North Virginia. Now, if this region has a failover, if this region has some disaster, how DNS knows? Because we are configuring failover.ekascloud-training.com pointing to the load balancer of North Virginia. So which means anybody in the world, when they are sending requests, they are always forwarded there, right? So if there is a disaster, how DNS knows that it has to forward to Singapore? For that, there is something called health check. So we need to configure health check, which means DNS will do health check to the load balancer, which means I can't create failover routing without health check. So first I need to create a health check. Okay, what is health check? Route 53 or the DNS will keep on checking whether the load balancer in North Virginia is always reachable. It will keep on checking every 10 seconds. If there is a disaster, Route 53, even though this is the primary record, it will not give the primary endpoint to the customers, which means people in internet. Okay. So I'm going to create primary record failover.ekascloud-training.com pointing to load balancer 1 in North Virginia. Okay, let me do this. So I'm going to configure failover.ekascloud-training.com pointing to load balancer in North Virginia. And I'll say this is the primary record. And I'll also enable a health check. Health check is mandatory. Okay. Then I'll create a secondary record with the same name, failover.ekascloud-training.com pointing to the load balancer in Singapore. I don't need health check. Health check is optional. Okay, if you ask if this region is failing and if this region is also failing, then what to do? Nothing to do. Okay, right. So there is no health check for the second region. Okay, right. So for the primary region, you need health check. So now let me do health check. So first I need to go to the health checks. Okay, I need to click on create health check. I'll say health North Virginia. I'll say the endpoint as domain name and use the load balancers endpoint for creating the health check. So which means the Route 53 DNS will always check whether this load balancer is up and running or not using HTTP. And health check, it will, if you enable fast health check, it will check for 10 seconds. Every 10 seconds, it will send the health check. And if you enable threshold of 3, first health check, if it is failing, it will do the second health check. If second is also failing, again it will do the third. Third is also failing, only then it will consider as a failed health check. That is unhealthy. Okay, it will consider as unhealthy. Okay. Okay, I'll just click on create health check. Okay, so I created a health check. Just now I created, so it will take some time for the health check to become healthy or unhealthy. Okay, so as of now, the status of the health check is unknown, but in few minutes, this health check will become active, I guess. Okay, let's wait. So have you understood why we are creating health check? Because people in Android, when they send request to DNS with the name failover.ekascloud-training.com, they will get the endpoint of the North Virginia load balancer and they will be forwarded to North Virginia. But if there is a disaster in North Virginia, how DNS knows that? Maybe let's say someone else is accessing. In DNS, still we have the same record pointing to North Virginia, right? So that's the reason there is something called health check. This DNS or Route 53 will keep on checking whether the server is or whether the load balancer is running or not. If there is a disaster in North Virginia, load balancer will go down and DNS will detect it in 30 seconds. And within 30 seconds, if anyone is sending request, Route 53 will give the secondary URL and people will be forwarded to Singapore. Okay, right. That's what is going to happen. Now, if I do a refresh, let me check whether the health check is succeeded or not. Yeah, now you can see the health check is healthy. It says healthy. Now I can go to Route 53 hosted zone. You can go to records. I can click on create record. I'll create a record of failover.ekascloud-training.com pointing to load balancer in North Virginia. And I'll go with failover type. I told you for primary record type, health check is mandatory. That's what we created already, health checks. I'm pointing the health check. I'll use R1 and I'll click on create record. Okay. Now, anybody in the world, if they try accessing this name, failover.ekascloud-training.com, can you try? If you try, you are forwarded to North Virginia. Okay. Anybody in the world at this moment, if they try failover.ekascloud-training.com, they are forwarded to North Virginia. Okay. And I'll again create another record. I'll say failover.ekascloud-training.com, CNAME, and the load balancer of Singapore. I'll copy the load balancer endpoint of Singapore and I'll paste it. And I'll go with failover. I'll go with secondary record type. For secondary, health check is optional. For primary, health check is mandatory. Okay. I go with R2 and I'll click on create record. So when I do this, okay, now see, if someone from internet, if they try accessing failover.ekascloud-training.com, okay, someone from internet, anybody in the world, okay, if they try accessing failover.ekascloud-training.com, they are forwarded to North Virginia. Okay. Yeah, you can see I'm getting response from North Virginia, US region. And if I switch, it is switching between first availability zone server and second availability zone server. Right? It will never go to Singapore. But now I'm going to make a disaster. All right. How can I make a disaster in North Virginia? Right? See, disaster means I'm not going to crash Amazon's infrastructure. But what I can do is I can block the traffic flowing to the North Virginia. So here we have a security group. What I'll do is I'll block port number 80. If I block port number 80, DNS can't do the health check. It will think that it is down. Okay, let me do that. So I go to security group of North Virginia. Okay. And I go to, okay, let me check. I don't know which security group I map. Okay, so I think, yeah, this is the security group map. So I go to the security group and I go to edit inbound rules. I'll remove the HTTP rule. Okay. So I remove the HTTP rule and I'll click on save rule. So what happens? So health check will keep on checking the server's health, right? Because I removed the port number, this is going to become unhealthy in few seconds. Okay. Actually, at this moment, if you try accessing, let's imagine that there is a disaster. At this moment, if you try accessing, nobody in the world will get the response. Okay. It says it's loading. You are not getting the response because I blocked the traffic to North Virginia. Okay. You can see it is loading. Now, health check will fail in 30 seconds. Let's see.
Sir, I have a question here, sir.
Yes.
So currently, what you have done is you have created two security groups. You made it, or sorry, you created two instance. You created a target group of that and attached to ALB.
Yes.
But if the instances fail, the ALB will still be healthy, right? And
Yeah,
failover is
that is
only
the health.
checking the
No.
healthy part of
Actually,
ALB.
no. See, here there will be one health check. This is ELB health check.
Yes. Yes.
That is different. Here there is another health check. This is DNS health check.
Okay.
Okay. So if DNS is healthy, the traffic goes to load balancer. It will switch between this server. If this server fails, load balancer knows that this server is failing. So all people will be forwarded here. That is with the help of ELB health check. Now today
Yes.
nothing to do with ELB health check. Okay. Today I created Route 53 health check. So Route 53 health check, it will check the load balancer, whether the load balancer is healthy or not. It will not check the EC2 instances is healthy or not. Okay. Yes, because I pointed the health endpoint of the load balancer, right? So it will
Yes.
check whether DNS is healthy or not. So if DNS is failing, so what I did, I actually gone to the security group, what I mapped to the load balancer, and I removed the inbound role. So I don't really have any disaster in North Virginia, but I blocked the traffic. Because I blocked the traffic, this will become unhealthy. Once it become unhealthy, right, you can see, right? So after doing refresh, you can see it become unhealthy, right? It will take 30 seconds to become unhealthy. Now, if you use the name failover.ekascloud.com, you can see the traffic is forwarding to Singapore. Have you understood? This is like a disaster recovery setup, right? Have you understood?
Okay. Okay.
So disaster recovery setup, if you want to configure, you need to have multiple servers running with auto scaling group and load balancer in one region. Same setup has to be there in a different region. Then you need to use failover routing with Route 53. Okay. You can obviously have the backend database as well. Okay. I didn't do that. So RDS recently we are learning. You can have RDS, multi-easy, repeaters, all that can be configured. Okay. Right. Okay. So this is enough for the day.
So I have a question, sir. So the health check is for the Route 53 for all the protocols, right? All the routing policies.
Health check is there for symbol routing, weighted route. Sorry, health check is not there for symbol routing. Okay, see, if you go to create record, when you select symbol routing, there is no option where you can map a health check. For symbol routing, there is no health check.
Okay.
For weighted routing, there is health check. See, I configured weighted routing today little earlier. 50-50, we were distributing 50-50 traffic, but I didn't do health check for that time. Okay. Even for geolocation, there is health check, but I didn't do that. For latency, there is health check. For failover, there is health check. But only for failover, health check is mandatory. That's what I created health check. Okay. This is mandatory health check. But for others, health check is optional. Okay.
Okay, sir.
For all the routing policy, there is health check. Other than symbol routing and geo proximity, for all the other routing policy, there is health check. Okay.
So geo proximity is asking the latitude and longitude values, right?
Yes. Yes. That will be interesting, but I'm not teaching today. So you can research
Maybe
about
next
it.
Saturday.
Yeah, we'll plan. Okay.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so hope you have understood whatever I taught you today. So this is enough for today. Learned a lot. Maybe I taught you 4 routing policies. One is symbol routing, used for pointing to a single endpoint, single EC2 instance, single load balancer, single S3 bucket. Okay, that is symbol routing. Then weighted routing is to give certain percentage of traffic to one version of application and certain percentage of traffic to the newer version of application. Recommended to configure in the nearest region. Okay, maybe US East one and US West one, something like that. But not recommended for global application. But if you have global application, you can go with geolocation routing or geo proximity routing, which I haven't explained. Geolocation routing is better based on the customer's location. You will be routed to that particular endpoint. That is geolocation. We saw that. That is great for global application. And finally, I taught you about failover. So you don't want multiple setup across the globe. You are just setting one primary and one secondary. So you want to have just a disaster recovery. So all traffic should always forward to one region. If there is a disaster, then it should get forward to other region. If that's the case, you can create failover. Okay. And health check is important for weighted geolocation and failover. But failover, you need mandatory health check. So I created it. But for other routing, I didn't enable health check. Okay. But yeah, this is enough. So you can explore related to it. We'll finish with this. I'll teach you about some other policies later.